try to do this in an orderly fashion. Today we're going to talk about building a product that takes off everywhere, lessons from expanding internationally. And to talk about this, I have Nicolas from Algolia, a company I invested in a few years ago, and that has grown quite a bit in the last few years. We have Ulrich from Falcon.io, who's going to tell us a bit more how he expanded and is selling to enterprise. And then we have Robin from Insided, who's taken a while to internationalize, but he's on a good path now for taking over the world. And myself, I'm Renaud Visage. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Eventbrite, also a venture partner at Index Ventures. So looking at sharing a bit of our history. We're not a typical SaaS platform, but a lot of the things we had to build at Eventbrite and the way we expanded, I think, are valuable lessons for SaaS companies as well. To start, let's talk about the product itself. Well, let's do a few quick intros already first. If you can tell us a bit more about where you are, number of employees, ARR, international proportion of your business, and key milestones in your existence in like 30 seconds, that would be awesome. Robin, you want to?
That's challenging. So my name is Robin. We are in the community platform space. We started 6 years ago, first in the Netherlands, Amsterdam-based. After, I think, 2 or 3 years, we started to focus on Europe from a sales perspective. Then we raised our first round of venture capital, 6 million euros. I think we were about 3 million ARR at that time. And only after that, we kind of expanded to the US and set up multiple offices, among others in Madrid, mainly for development. So it's taken some time to internationalize, I think, our company. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Ulrich at Falcon.io. We are a customer experience SaaS born out of social. So we help a lot of larger brands, mid-market brands, handle all of their social touch points and other kind of more emerging touch points within digital. We internationalized pretty heavily after having raised our Series A. I'll get into some more detail on that. We are kind of speeding through the 20s of ARR, still growing pretty fast, having raised 3 rounds of capital with 3 European investors. Pretty exciting things ahead of us, even though I think our market is pretty competitive. We never thought that what we were doing was a regional play, so we just decided to go, I mean, global, or at least Western Hemisphere, from the get-go. And I think that was ultimately very key to the success we've seen.
Great, thank you.
All right, then Nicolas from Algolia. So we are a search API. We help about like 8,000 applications on the web to do their search. If you search on Medium, on Twitch, you are actually using us. The company is 5 years old. We are 150 today, but we were only 65 at the end of last year. It's kind of like big scaling. We started global from the first day in terms of market, but we started from Paris. Today we are headquartered in San Francisco. We have a big office, engineering mostly in Paris, an office in New York, another in Atlanta, and we're going to open London next. What else? Yeah.
I started Eventbrite with my 2 co-founders in 2006, a long time ago, so much older than you guys, I guess. Today we have about 800 employees in 13 offices, I think. We acquired 2 companies recently, so we're just getting the numbers correct now. Started expanding in Europe, in the UK in 2011, expanding the rest of Europe fairly quickly after that. Then we bought a company in South America, so we've been expanding in Argentina and Brazil. Opened an Australian office, so we've got a big breadth of geographical coverage and also a lot of work on the product side. And we'll start with the product side first, because we had to do a lot of tweaks to our product. We are B2B to C platform, so we had to internationalize the payment options in all the different places we're in, complied with all the laws, provide the interface both for event organizers and event attendees in the language of the country we wanted to expand into. And we found that our business is very demands a local presence, especially on the sales side. So it will be interesting to contrast with your experience. And maybe we could start with Nicolas about your product, because you said you were global from day one. but you also sold to fairly global e-commerce players or content players out there. So is there something, and I'm thinking of one particular technical implementation detail that you decided to go to adopt that I think made you a lot more appealing for companies with a global presence?
Maybe the location of the servers.
Exactly.
No, so the key thing here is that we're mostly addressing an audience of developers, and developers are very similar around the world. So from day one, we knew that it didn't make sense to address the local market. We could have users everywhere. Then one of the key things we've done is having the service available in different regions. So from the beginning, we had servers in the US and servers in France, basically, for Europe. Today, we have, I don't know, I remember exactly, like 1,100 servers in more than 50 data centers around the world, in every region. And I think that was one of the things that pushed us at looking at the global market right away, instead of staying local. We do search, so the latency, the response time is so important. And so to be able to get a short response time, you need to be very close to the users. So you need to have servers that are close to the users.
And did you see a change in user demand when you implemented your distributed network? Or the type of companies that you started attracting? Was there an inflection point at all? Or?
I think there is two things. There is the location of the servers. So when we have servers in Asia, of course, like in Australia, that helps us to penetrate better that market. And then there is this capacity of distributing search so that we could replicate the data everywhere so that you're going to users for the same service can simply query the closest server. But that's mostly for bigger customers. So at the beginning, it didn't matter so much.
Okay. Ulrich, you have clients like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, very large corporates with global footprints. What does it take to build a product that answers the need of people in so many geographies, and have you had to make a lot of local improvements to your product?
I think the narrative that I can offer kind of in this context is that we had to do surprisingly little in terms of internationalizing the product experience for users than we originally thought we had to. So we early on, we came out of Copenhagen, Denmark, where I'm a Danish national. Everything started there, the product was built there. But then we sold from there in an inside sales model that we really made quite effective. And we saw a lot of traction from the German-speaking region and something from France as well. Typically, countries or markets where you say you really need to internationalize. And we still today have not translated labels on buttons in the product. There's a ton of things that we have done to do obviously support character sets left to right and all this stuff. But we always kind of had this somewhere down the roadmap. We would ask the sales and the customer success team whether or not there would be other things we should spend our development bandwidth on before doing those things. And it's just kept kind of been on the back burner for all that time. But I think on the data center side, that has been a thing also for specifically. I mean, you have GDPR coming up, which is interesting. And before that was a thing, if you sold to the German markets, you would know words like Datenschutz or Betriebsrat, and you would need to do kind of certain things there that was different, and the data processing agreements and how you actually were set up technically became pretty important.
Do you have specific countries within like a big group like that that have specific requirements as to where the data is stored, for example? I'm thinking Germany. Like, do you have to adapt your infrastructure to the client?
Yeah, we had to. We were really happy when the Frankfurt AWS center opened up.
Yes.
We moved a ton of stuff to that almost immediately. That's at least one way to answer the question. And I think when we look at internationalizing a product, it's more where data is stored than what do we do with the user interface, for instance, which is often what people think of first.
Mm-hmm. Great. Robin, you build community platforms for brands, and these communities are international. When did you're supporting 20 plus languages at this point? What was the process of realizing that you needed to support more than one language, and how did you automate all the process to make it much easier today than it was?
Yeah, so we are based out of Amsterdam. So first we only sold to Dutch customers, and then quickly we thought, okay, let's do this in the rest of Europe, and the translation cannot be a big issue. Well, I think it lasted for about 2 years, and there was lots of internal struggles around the translation part of our platform. So our platform is actually used on the side of Sonos and TomTom, for example. Yeah, and that platform needed to be translated, in the individual languages. So first we had a couple of interns internally translating that, but that didn't really work out. Nobody wanted to take ownership of those translations, basically. So it took us 2 years, and in the end we thought of, okay, let's just make it self-service, so customers can do it by themselves. Because obviously you have all these feature updates continuously, and you need to translate that on a continuous basis. But now, luckily, it's no problem anymore. And yeah, sometimes you look at languages like Ukraine, and I look at my platform, and then it's like I have no clue what's in there. So that was quite challenging in the beginning.
So your clients can hire their own translator to translate your product?
Yeah, I mean, we offer some basic translations, obviously, for all the individual countries. But if you want to translate, stuff on their platform, like the buttons, but then on the front end, because they have their own tone of voice, as a specific company, yeah, then they need to be able to do that for their specific company.
Right.
So self-service all in now.
Let's move on to your international strategies. We'll start with you, Robin. Like, you started selling outside of your home country in 2014, starting in the US in 2017. Apparently it took quite a while for the US team to get their groove on. Can you decide what was the main thought process behind your strategy?
Yeah. So I think the first years we were just selling in the Dutch market, and we were a little bit afraid of doing that on the international level, because we frankly had no idea to sell to enterprises. I think our ACV is about 100K, so we had no idea how to do that in the rest of Europe. But then, we just gave it a try, and it worked out pretty awesome. In fact, we realized that we were able to sell in all the individual countries in Europe quite fast. So that's when we scaled that, basically. Then we raised the first round of funding, and only after that we could offer also our service in the US. So we set up a team of 5 people there. But yeah, it cost a lot of money, specifically to have an enterprise sales team there. So we couldn't do that before the fundraising. So yeah, that's why we only started indeed a little bit later in the US. And that was also quite a challenge. In fact, we've been running our US operations for about 8 months now, 9 months. And we only closed our first customer this week even. So it's 8 months times, 80K or so per month is our spend there. So we already spent like 700K or so on the operation without any revenue. So that's quite a costly operation. But luckily we're now on the path of growth. And yeah, our sales cycles are quite long. So.
Did you have to tweak your marketing message for the US and the sales training and anything else to cater to that market?
Yeah, I think, you have to find, you see a lot of talks here also about product market fit. I think, if you go to the US as a European company, then, you totally need to redefine your product market fit. Our main industry in Europe was telecom. So we sold to each individual telecom operators in all the different countries. But yeah, in the US, there are only 4 bigger telcos. So yeah, that's not a big market for us. So we had to basically reinvent that and see, okay, but where does our solution have the biggest benefit, and where can we scale the fastest? And that took quite some time, to be honest. So we tried different verticals with a BDR approach, and I think we are now almost onto something which we can scale to a next level. And also in terms of messaging, marketing, it's far more advanced there, obviously. Yeah, we also needed to work a lot on that.
Your clients are more advanced, not in their needs.
Yeah.
Cool. Nicolas, you took a slightly different approach than usual SaaS platforms. Like a big part of your effort was having a self-service platform, which is not the case for you guys, and also engaging the community with free tools like dog search that can give a taste of what Algolia can do. Was that a concerted effort from the beginning to really find ways to engage with the developer community, or did you build that up over time?
It was a conscious effort, but of course, with time, we did more and more. What happened in the beginning is that we didn't have any marketing team anywhere. So basically, we had to do everything ourselves, but we knew our audience. We were developers. We were selling to developers. So we tried to get where they were. That's how we could do the search of Hacker News, and that's how we did that dog search project, basically powering the search of a lot of frameworks, developer frameworks, so that when developers go there, they can see our brand, like it's powered by Algolia. We have like about 350 of them, like such as React from Facebook or Bootstrap recently. It's kind of a win-win. For us, it's definitely marketing, but it's also giving back, giving to them, and they kind of like get something in exchange. It's kind of building the brand, and that can be done from anywhere. So we started that from Paris, from the beginning. We didn't have to be in the US for that.
And how do you monetize your community? Is that
We don't.
converting them into paying customers is always a challenge.
We actually don't even try.
No?
What happens here is that developers are a tight community. They speak a lot among themselves. Everything we do for the long tail, for like this community, actually helps us even on the enterprise side, because they become our champions there. They are going to help us get inside the account. So we don't even try to monetize them.
So there's no incentive for the developer to push you to their boss and boss's boss.
No direct one.
Okay.
At least, well, would send some swag.
It's good. It's a very earnest way to gain trust from the community. And if they don't feel exploited, I think that's definitely
That's right.
a positive sign. You're working with very large corporates that have headquarters in the US. You were a small company at some point. Like, how do you sell to enterprise? It's the holy grail for a lot of companies present here.
Yeah.
What's your secret there?
So I think Robin mentioned ACV, and I think ACV, some people have said it, but I think it's worth underscoring that the ACV you're selling really defines the operating model that you can set up. So we are at 20K ACV, kind of, we have a bell curve that's pretty sharp there in the middle around 20K. And that lends itself to, usually when you have smaller ACVs than Robin has, you also have then a little bit faster sales cycles. These things tend to go hand in hand. So we build up, first of all, we're from Denmark. No, it's a tiny market, so the discussion on whether or not to break out was, very short. So we build up an inside sales model, and really, even though I'm a product guy at heart, I'm sometimes selling, I've been spending 5 years building this model. And because we had that stuff set up, we were able to, by way of the metrics, kind of transplant that when we opened up our US office. So we did inside sales to all of Europe, out of Copenhagen. Then we opened up a Berlin, and actually first we had some guys come in at lunchtime, CET, try to sync up with US East Coast time and do outbound prospecting on the kind of few leads we got coming into the US first. And the response from that just led me to go to the board after our Series A. So we hadn't raised a ton of money. After a Series A, it said, you know what, it's probably expensive to go there, and maybe we should wait, but I want to go there now. So we kind of drop-shipped our first head of sales and hired 4 reps locally. And we got the first things going. And we were able to see, by way of the data and our operating model, how things were going. So when, some of our newly hired US reps, they would start playing the fiddle about how things are very, very different than the US in terms of specific things around closing rates and stuff. We would know that they probably weren't because some other reps were doing okay. But one thing that we did do in the US that was different on the, you could say, product market fit or messaging angle was that we had a different competitive dynamic in the US than we have in Europe. So there were some guys with quite a bit of overlap with what we were doing that were specifically gunning for the larger enterprises, the Fortune 100s, maybe all the way down to 500. And we had this 20K ACV model, a nice entry-level type of deal where the sponsors would often be operational people further down in the org that were able to make these deals. So we're really nicely set up for land and expand. So what we told the US team, and what they're frankly still doing, is that they're playing in another part of town that's has the same amount of gunfire than some of these 2 other competitors in the US that are going after full-on accounts-based marketing and BDRs going after the Fortune 500s. We're actually going after the mid-market, which is an incredible, sizable opportunity in the US. So there's a little bit of cognitive overhead in managing, hey, we have, we just landed a huge deal out of Europe. You US guys still focus on the lead flow that you have in front of you.
Great, thank you. It's very easy to talk about being global from day one, but the reality of building teams, expanding, hiring the right people, finding the right reporting structure is a lot more complex. So you've done it super early in your life as a company. You moved to the US, what, 1 year after you started or 2 years?
A bit later.
Yeah.
No, what we did early was to go to an accelerator in the US. We did the Y Combinator.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So that's when we flipped, we became American. But we actually came back to Paris after, and only 1 year later, 2015, did I move there and start building operations.
So how different was it building a team there? And can you talk about the differences of culture and how you resolve that to create a unified company culture overall?
That's a tough one. No, I think hiring is the most biggest challenge when you move, because you are, as Europeans, you are not used to hire in that market. Especially when you are going mostly to hire sales, marketing, people who are very, very good at selling themselves, much better than the Europeans. So honestly, you are going to do mistakes. We did hire a few people before I moved there. None of them stayed long. At the same time, I mean, you are a small company in Europe. Nobody knows you there. Why would people join you? It's a lot more work for you to hire there than from local people, even if you get some help from recruiters and so on. So we did use recruiters to get our first hires, but that's tough. Culture-wise, I think even at that time we had a very strong culture, and we knew the importance of communication. So already, even in Paris, we were only speaking English already. So there are like a few things like that we had put in place. We're already traveling back and forth so often that progressively we kind of built the muscle of like handling the time zone. So it made the opening of the office smoother, because we already had like a few things in place, like English only, like weekly OLANs, synchronized video, everything already working.
Great. How did you tweak your marketing materials, and what kind of, how do you motivate US salespeople versus European salespeople? Because their expectations as far as salaries and help and marketing support is very different, I think, than the way we sell in Europe. So did you realize that quickly? And
yeah, we figured out it was quite expensive already from day one. So we started with a team of 5. I think the best decision ever was that 2 of them were based out of Europe, and we relocated them to our New York office. So that really helped set the culture and all the knowledge about the product and how we basically sold in Europe. So that's, I think, great, because I totally agree. I mean, all American people I've interviewed, they were basically God's gift to Earth, because they were fantastic and everybody hit President's Club and they were all great, basically. And obviously that doesn't happen. Everybody is super expensive there. So, people who go, straight from college, they already earn like, a 60K base salary and 30K in variable commission. So yeah, that's a big P&L item. So yeah, and if you have 5 of these guys from the start, that's quite expensive. But luckily, that European guy is like down to earth, and he can say, come on, guys, we first need to prove ourselves here, right? First, let's do some sales, and then we can get some more demands to the CEO about, health insurance or pension costs or whatever. So that helped us pretty well. Yeah.
Were you prepared mentally for that, or did you discover things as you went?
Yeah, I kind of discovered that. I still remember the first time the team was there for they just started, and I was there the week after. And then the first thing somebody said, yeah, but why don't we have Apple computers here, because we're using HP. And I was like, okay, let's first try to get this operation from the ground, right? So yeah, it was quite a challenge. But yeah, I mean, obviously we had budgeted for the US operation for a year, so so we knew obviously what to expect. But yeah, taking 8 months to get to our first deal, that was quite painful. That's maybe not what we had expected.
There's a question about how you picked the city that you started in the US. You started in New York?
Yeah, we started in New York. I mean, there's lots of discussion. My advice is just pick one and don't bother too much, because it takes too much time. But choose some city in the East Coast, because else time zones will kill you.
Yep.
It's not an option to do San Francisco from Europe from day one, because in the end you will be freaking that, having calls in the middle of the night, not going to be an issue.
Rick, same?
I agree on the time zone. I mean, I think there was a lot of kind of confirmation bias going on when I saw, hey, there are some leads coming in from New York City. Yes. So then we'll set up shop there because I think we just realized that that time zone was very, very, very difficult. When you then been there for a while, then you start, I mean, even the 60K plus 30, that's a pretty good deal for you.
BDR.
For you. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, there we go. So you start to think about, okay, some of these guys who've set up shop in Denver, where the time zone is actually, better distributed for inside sales teams. That's what happens afterwards. But I think as you start out, you're trying to, just make basic things work, and you need that overlap in terms of time. Yeah. If you're not flipping, a ton of people to that office, which you should at least be seeding that with some strong cultural nugget there.
There's a lot of different models for expanding globally. Can you describe how your sales and marketing organizations are structured globally and how you think of regions, especially when you sign big global customers, like who gets the incentive paycheck for closing the sale? Is it distributed? Is it?
I know this is not being telecasted, right? Because that's always a can of worms. But so we have a head of sales in the U.S. and a head of sales in EMEA.
Are they reporting to you?
They report directly to me, at least for the time being. Those markets are somewhat different. So I enjoy getting the specifics of that from those guys directly. Then we have a VP CX who runs customer marketing and customer success. That happens to be a particularly nice alignment trick for us. And then I have a VP commercial operations, which does all the demand gen stuff and the entire stack, which has really been built out very beautifully. So we have the whole Monty from performance marketing, BDRs, AEs, and a lot of sophistication within those brackets also. And we have that in EMEA and the US, and we can kind of see that all the time. How it's performing and
Europe is one organization in your view, or?
Yeah, so we have certain VPs that are global that report into me, and then sales is split up.
Okay.
New biz sales.
But you don't have separate organizations in different countries that.
No, there's a lot of overlap. I have my CFO out of the New York City office, so we're kind of trying to balance leadership to swing the pendulum. So there's a good amount of kind of weight, C-level action going on in the New York City office as well. I guess we kind of swing the pendulum towards that.
And you try to maintain some global marketing organization that aligns on tooling practices, same at the sales level, and how do you do that?
So there's one person who looks after the demand gen side, and then there's one person that looks after you could say the brand and the messaging side. And there's obviously a lot of alignment that needs to happen there. But what we found was that it's much more important that you align the demand gen efforts within marketing with the sales teams directly. Then you get a lot of synergies in the top and mid funnel. So we do a ton of that. We do a lot of the tricks that Guillaume from Segment Now Drift showed earlier, and I think that's incredibly important if you run an inside sales organization or you go to market, that you really get in and constantly work all that stuff. So we have an entire roadmap and developers on that team with the same guy that also looks after the SDR managers. So it's a little bit novel, I guess, but it's really working well for us.
Okay. So we have only 1 minute left, so I'm going to go to the questions here. How's your favorite topic? How's the European GDPR going to change the international business specifically, especially with Eventbrite? How are you prepared? Well, I think like many companies out there, and we were surprised not to see any talks about that today, because it's definitely a big topic for a lot of companies that aren't doing business internationally, especially from the US, where we're not quite used to the level of detail and protection that Europe grants their citizens. So Safe Harbor provided a way to cope. I think GDPR changes the game. So we're doing a lot of planning around that. How do we incorporate that into our products? How do we show the right compliance messages in the right places, put in all the processes that need to be put in place? I'm sure, I don't know if you guys are doing any differently. we don't know what the enforcement of these will be, so we just want to hedge on the side of caution and be prepared when the time comes. Anything to add? That's
Yeah, I think Ulrich has a
I think
pretty big feeling on it.
On GDPR, so for us it's pretty big. There's a ton of social data, a lot of personal data that's being handled, and of course you have the networks themselves, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, so forth, doing quite a few things on their terms of service, which solves a bit of it. But you have these weird things that you basically need to do if you have an international organization. So a CSM are actually not allowed to log into your backend and look at data for a German customer, for instance. And it's those things, those are surprising things that you need to add to your roadmap kind of now. Yep. And then I think overall, which is kind of interesting, is we're trying to turn this into something that we can use as a nugget coming out of Europe, is that I think GDPR is largely turning marketing into a regulated industry. And if you just kind of have a taste on that a little bit, that's pretty gargantuan. But we don't know how the follow-up and the actual implementation of this is going to run. So there's this huge range where you will often have your CFO on one side, erring on the side of let's be perhaps a little bit more compliant than we have to, and then you have somebody like me saying, hey, no, let's make exactly what we need to do to stay compliant, but let's turn it into a marketing nugget that can give us an edge.
Still have a product to run and a business to run. So.
That's it.
Thank you all. I invite you all for the GDPR conference in sometime next year. I'm sure that will happen. But thank you for the panel.
That's going to be too late.
Panels for their contributions, and feel free to ping us if you have any questions outside.
Thank you.
Thanks.